Welcome to Lattes and Laundry, a podcast created to keep you company as you fold the clothes or for when you take your well-deserved coffee break. Life at home, while never dull, can sometimes be a little lonesome. My hope is that this podcast makes you feel like you have a friend with you as you go about your day. I'm so glad that you're here. Hello friends, happy Monday. Welcome back to another episode of Lattes and Laundry. This is episode 2. We are going to just do this podcast in episodes instead of seasons. I know in the last episode I mentioned that I was going to try to do it by seasons, but I think if I do that, then I feel pressure to come up with some kind of theme, and I think I would rather just go one episode at a time instead of trying to pick a theme for the whole season. I don't know. We may change that at some point, but for right now, I'm just going to go episode to episode. So I wanted to let you know that. Also, thank you to everybody who has subscribed to my podcast channel, who has watched the first episode and interacted with the first episode or sent me a message about it. I am so thankful for all of you. Thank you so much for subscribing. I'm very excited for where this is going to lead. So thank you so much for being a part of it. In today's episode, we are going to talk about personal style, discovering personal style, all of that kind of thing as relates to like fashion and clothes and all that. We will eventually do another episode that is on personal style with home decor, because that's another thing that I'm very interested in. But today we're just going to talk specifically about clothes and fashion. So I found a quote. I think for each episode I'd like to read you either a quote or a scripture verse, and I found a quote that goes perfectly in line with what we're going to talk about today. And the quote that I found is by a man named G. Bruce Boyer, and I looked him up to see who he was. Or who he is. He's still living. But he is a journalist, and he is the fashion editor of Town and Country magazine. And it said he is formerly the fashion editor of GQ and Esquire. So this man is quite an authority on men's fashion. And what he said was, real style is never right or wrong. It's a matter of being yourself on purpose. And I thought that quote was so great, because we're going to talk about, kind of like the rules and that kind of thing, and how really what matters is finding what you love, but there are some things that can help you. And I think that quote just is so perfect, because really personal style is just that. It's personal. You find what you like, you find what represents you, and you go with that. And I thought that quote was just so perfect. So we're going to kind of jump in. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my kind of style evolution over the years, and I'm going to give you some tips that I have found helpful and also give you some resources. First, before I say anything else, I just want to say that I am by no means an expert on this topic. All I can offer you is my experience and the things that I have learned over the years, tips from my own journey to personal style. And I still don't think that I have arrived at my perfect personal style. I'm still growing in that area. I don't really like to position myself as an expert on anything, because I really don't feel like I am. But I do think I have things that I can share. But I just want to say that first. I am no expert on this topic. But when I look back over my style over the years, I like to think about being a teenager, because when I was a teenager, as probably for most of us girls, when you become a teenager, that's when you really start experimenting with makeup and hair and clothes and jewelry, and really kind of entering into that space where you're in that awkward stage between being a kid and being a young lady. And I remember that phase so well, and I laugh when I look back at some of the things that I wore or ways that I did my hair or my makeup, that I really wish I had more pictures of it, because it would be just really interesting to look at how you've grown and changed over the years. And throughout all of my years of developing my style, I can see a couple of common threads in that I liked flashy and I liked vintage, and those two things have kind of carried me through my life, and they have been a common thread in a lot of my style from being a teenager, even from being a child, on up through adulthood. And I think that's something I'm going to get into later in the episode, but I do think that you will always be able to find some kind of common thread in all of the things that you like. And for me, I like flashy, pretty things, and I like vintage things. And so I do feel like there was kind of a time period between, it was like once I got married through when I had my second child, where I kind of hit this plateau in my fashion journey, like where I feel like I wasn't really experimenting with anything. I wasn't really being super selective about the clothes that I wore. I went through more of like a neutral basics phase and kind of lost some of those things that were unique to me during that time. And then of course, when you're pregnant, like, certain things don't fit you anymore. You're doing maternity clothes. Not that I wasn't trying to look pretty or cute or anything. I still was. But I just feel like I lost a period of creativity. That's probably the biggest thing. I kind of stopped being creative with my personal style. And I was just more wearing clothes versus putting outfits together, if that makes any sense. And then of course, pregnancy and postpartum, it's kind of hard to find personal style when you're pregnant and postpartum. And then, I had my son, and then 6 months later got pregnant with my daughter. And right after I had my son, I was starting to get creative with outfits again, and then I got pregnant again. So it was back to the maternity clothes and then postpartum again. But ever since I had my second child, I found myself wanting to investigate the fashion world more, to get creative with outfits, to figure out what my personal style was. Something I have found very interesting is to go back in time and kind of study the fashion decades and look at how things have changed as we have progressed. You look at all the very specific silhouettes of past decades and, historical fashion changes in past decades. You think about the very specific style of the 20s, the very specific silhouettes that they had in the 1920s, and how that changed from the 1920s on up through the 1950s, and then from the 1950s on up through the 60s and 70s, and how things changed and like historical changes were made to women's fashion. And then, you had the 80s and 90s, which again was another change. And then you had the 2000s, and the early 2000s had I feel like it took a lot of inspiration from past decades. And then you had, of course, the 2010s, which also took a lot of inspiration from past decades. And now we have more so these really quick trend cycles, and you have things broken up into aesthetics. I mean, I guess things have always kind of been in aesthetics. Like you think about the 60s, not everybody was a flower child. There was different types of styles in the 1960s. There were different types of styles in the 1980s. The thing I like about 1980s fashion is like the very chic, or even like 80s and 90s. Like if you go back and you look at the Ralph Lauren 90s runway show, that style, that very chic business style is what I liked about the 80s and 90s. But so there was always kind of different styles, but now there are so many like aesthetics. And then, like I said, the trend cycles come and go so fast. And I am a millennial. I only made the millennial cut by like the skin of my teeth. I was born in January of 96, so I'm just barely a millennial. And so my teenage nostalgia is the 2010s. Whenever I see stuff that's like nostalgia from the 2010s era, like that reminds me of being a teenager. And so I am just like completely floored that a lot of the stuff from the 2010s is coming back already. But like our trend cycles go so much quicker, whereas we used to have these like decades of historical fashion and specific silhouettes and things that were changing, and now things come back and cycle in and out so fast. And I just think that's really interesting. But one of the things that has kind of been difficult for me to nail down a specific personal style has been the fact that I have very eclectic tastes. And that's true for me with music, that's true for me with home decor, and it's true for me with the fashion that I love. I am attracted to so many different styles from so many different fashion time periods. And so it's been kind of hard to nail down a specific cohesive style because I don't feel like I have one specific aesthetic. And I do admire people who have their personal style just completely nailed down to a T. I got behind this lady in line at the thrift store a couple of months ago, and she was dressed really cute. She had on this crocheted striped sweater that had all these really pretty, like, rich orange colors and deep olive green, and she had on flare jeans and like chunky heeled shoes. And when I looked at what she was buying stuff in those same colors, those very 70s colors. A lot of the stuff that she had looked like it was probably from the 70s. And then I actually left the thrift store right behind her, and she was driving a 70s van. And I remember thinking I could probably guess how her house looks, like what style her house is decorated in, just based off of the way she was dressed, what she was driving, and her thrift finds. And I thought that was so cool. So I think that people that have it like nailed down to a T and they have a specific, like one specific style that they like to dress in, like I think that's awesome. Unfortunately for me, I like too many things to be that specific with it. But I do admire people who do have that very specific style. I don't think that even now I would say that my personal style is perfectly cohesive. And maybe that's contradicting something that I have said already, but I don't think that your style has to be completely cohesive in order for it to be a well-maintained personal style. I think that you have to figure out how to find what you like and do it well. I think really the execution is more so important than having everything look the same. I think if you want to dress a specific way all the time, that's awesome. That's perfectly fine. But if you're like me and you like a lot of different things, then I think it's okay if it's not perfectly cohesive. And, I think you can look at it somewhere from the middle and be like, well, you don't have to throw out the entire rule book, but you can break some rules. Fashion rules are probably made to be broken anyway, because fashion is a form of self-expression and personal style is personal to you. And I think that with personal style, it's going to change as you change. And I don't think there's anything wrong with continuing to experiment with different styles and finding more things that you like. And especially as you age, learning, what you like as you age and as you change and as your interests change. But I do think that the first thing that you have to do when you want to start exploring your personal style and trying to figure out the way you want to dress is you need to figure out what it is that you like, especially if you're in kind of a rut like I was when I started exploring personal style. You have to kind of figure out what it is that you like, what it is that you like about fashion, what do you want to express, what do you feel the most confident in. And I think that you will always be able to find the common thread in your style. So for me, that was vintage. I was able to look at every style of dress that I've ever worn, like everything I've ever worn throughout my life, and find the common denominator. And for me, that was I like vintage pieces. And so I think once you figure out what you like, then you can learn how to do it well and how to execute it properly. But I do think that the very first thing is to figure out what you like. And it doesn't have to be dictated by a trend. It doesn't have to be dictated by a rule or anything. It can just be you have to figure out what it is that you like and what the way that you want to dress. Now that I've told you to break the rules, let's talk about some of the rules of thumb that you can use if you want to. You don't have to go by these. You don't have to fall down these rabbit holes. But because I fell down these rabbit holes and it is something that I do think has helped me, I thought I would share it. And the first thing is going to be figuring out your body type. Like I said, you do not have to do this. But I do think that it has become helpful for me to figure out my body type. Now, I'm going to give you some resources at the end of this podcast, but there is a whole world of discovering your body type, and it's super overwhelming. They have the basic body types, like hourglass, pear, inverted triangle, the basic ones. And then there's like the kibby body type thing. And that is one thing that I have not gotten into because it does seem super, super overwhelming to me. I basically looked at like your basic body types and I measured myself. So my body type is hourglass, and all that means is that the width of my shoulders and the width of my hips is almost the same, and I have waist definition, and that's all that means. But in learning about what body type I have, I can learn what kind of silhouettes are the most flattering on me. Doesn't mean I have to only wear those silhouettes, but I do find it helpful because it makes a lot of stuff make sense. Because when I would wear certain tops, they just wouldn't look right on me, and it would frustrate me, and I'd be like, why doesn't this work on me? What is the problem with this? And it's because it wasn't working with my proportions. And I do think it also simplifies shopping when you know what to look for. And I create quite a number of Pinterest boards, and I actually create quite a number of private Pinterest boards that are just for me. And I created one for myself for dressing an hourglass, and I've found there is a multitude of Pinterest pins where they will show you exactly what kinds of pieces to look for if you are an hourglass like me. But they do the same thing for every body type. But for me specifically, I'm looking for hourglass. There is so many pins that show you exactly what kind of pieces you should be looking for if you're an hourglass. What style of tops look the most flattering on you? For me, wrap tops are very flattering, like a peplum is flattering, anything that has the waist emphasis. And then also, I'm 5 foot, just over 5 foot tall, so I also have to consider that when it comes to looking for clothes. But I find it simplifies a lot of decisions because I know what my body type is. Now, everything that they say to dress as, I'm sorry, my son is making a noise and it distracted me. Everything that they give you advice on as far as what to wear, I'm probably not going to wear because some of the things that they recommend I'm just not comfortable in. But I am trying to look at the pieces that I buy from that perspective. And like I said, it makes a lot of stuff make more sense to me. And it also simplifies shopping. And that way I'm not wasting time buying something, like, just for example, if something was trendy and I liked it, but it was a certain shape, and then I order it and then it doesn't work on me because it doesn't look right on my proportions, it kind of saves me some of that trouble. So I do think it is very helpful to learn your body type. Like I said, you don't have to dress exactly the way they recommend for your body type, but I do think it's very, very helpful. The second thing is discovering your color season. This is a whole other rabbit hole as well. You will completely get engulfed in the information about your color season, and it can be a little bit tricky, but I do think that it is so valuable to know what colors that you look the best in. And, I didn't really know how much of a difference that it really did make. I mean, I know that when I wear certain colors, I get more compliments in certain colors, but I didn't realize what a difference it makes with your skin and even like your jawline, depending on what colors you wear. I had a virtual color analysis done not too long ago, and when she was having me drape the different colors over myself and having me really pay attention to the difference in my skin tone, my eyes, the circles under my eyes, my jawline, like the shadowing that was going on, it was really amazing how the difference was between colors that were the most harmonious with me and the colors that were not as harmonious with me. Now, the one thing that I will say about my color season is I do not intend to only dress in my color season, because there are some things that I have now in my closet that I love too much to not wear. But I do think that it is valuable for me going forward when I'm at the thrift store or when I'm buying clothes off of, a website or Amazon or something. I can look for those color options and add them into my wardrobe so that I have a good variety of pieces that are within my color season. One thing for me, when I did the color analysis, I was given True Winter, which does make a lot more sense for me because I have always gotten more compliments when I wear those really beautiful, deep jewel tones. And I do find that it does make a difference in the way my skin looks, the way my eyes look, all of that kind of thing. I've always noticed that. So when I did, originally I had done the ColorWise test, which is an online free test that you can do to tell you your color season, but it's not very accurate. I had taken it several times and it kept giving me a summer. And so I was thinking I was maybe a cool summer, but none of those deep, rich, high contrasted colors were in the summer palette. So I knew something wasn't quite right. So True Winter made a lot more sense to me. And one of the things she told me was that a neutral that would look really good on me is like a dark gray color. So I'm actively looking for some gray pieces. But also jewelry. I love gold jewelry. I wear gold jewelry primarily. I don't have a lot of silver jewelry. And in True Winter, silver and rose gold is more preferred, or even like an antique gold is more preferred, but I don't intend to stop wearing my gold jewelry. I mean, my wedding ring is gold. I'm not planning on stopping my gold jewelry, but I am planning on, when I'm at thrifting and looking at jewelry, because I always look at the jewelry when I'm thrifting, I am planning on trying to find more silver pieces to integrate into my wardrobe. And I have even changed up my makeup looks a little bit more to suit my color season. But I do think that it's a very helpful thing to know your color season, because with your personal style, you want to look your best. And I think that finding what colors you look the best in can really help. The next thing, I'm sure that most of you girls are already doing this, but that is to thrift. Go to your thrift stores. Go to thrift stores in other towns. Go often. Go in the morning. Go at night. I think thrifting is the best thing. If you are trying to experiment with your personal style, you want to experiment with different styles, different colors, different textures, especially if you are looking for vintage things. If that's something that you love and you want to integrate that into your wardrobe, go to thrift stores. Also, go to estate sales, especially if you are looking for vintage things. Look for estate sales, because I have found some of the best vintage clothes at estate sales. I've also found free vintage clothes at estate sales. So shopping secondhand is a great way, because it's not only is it budget friendly, but you can usually find a wide variety, especially in a thrift store. You can find a wide variety of colors, wide variety of fabrics. You can find jewelry, you can find shoes, accessories, all of that you can find in the thrift store. It just takes more work. It's a lot more work than just building a cart on Amazon. But it's very rewarding work. It's fun to thrift. Go with girlfriend, get you a coffee, and hit the thrift store. It's so much fun. And you can do this. You can browse the homewares and the books while you're at it. But I think it's rewarding work. You have to dig. You're going to have to look through a lot of really tacky stuff. You're going to have to look through a lot of stuff that's stained and ripped. But you will find some gems if you go thrifting. And it's a great way to build your wardrobe. The last tip that I'm going to give you is just look for inspiration. Pinterest, of course, is a great resource. I think it's a great resource. I have Pinterest boards created for lots of different fashion things. I have one for movie costumes. I have one for fashion icons. I have at least one that I know of that's for a specific aesthetic. I have one for vintage fashion, and then I just have one big board where I pin all of my favorite looks. And then I do have a private board where I pin things that I might purchase one day. So you can do a lot with Pinterest. You can find a lot of inspiration. You can also take your Pinterest photos and turn them into style boards. If you have a Canva account, you can create, it's like a mood board for your style inspiration. If you follow me on Instagram, I will leave my Instagram in the description box. On my style highlight, you can see my style board, my style mood boards, and I have different ones for casual style, for funky style, for more formal style, and I actually need to make some new ones for this year because I think my old ones were more fall and winter focused. I need to do some spring ones, but that can be a great way to build your inspiration. And also, you can pay attention in movies that you watch. Look at the wardrobe, especially if it's a movie that you really love. Pay attention to the wardrobe, or even TV shows. Just pay attention to the costumes, pay attention to the wardrobe. You can find so much inspiration from film and TV. So to wrap up this episode, I'm going to give you some resources of some people to follow, some books to read, some YouTube channels to look up if you are interested in anything that I've talked about in this episode. There is a girl on Instagram who talks about color seasons and the Kibbe body type system. She's actually the first person that I saw that talked about color seasons. Her name is Ellie Jean Royden, and that's her handle on Instagram. She goes into in-depth about all of that stuff. And then the person who did my virtual color analysis is Elisabeth J Bennet, and Elizabeth is spelled with an S. And that is her Instagram handle. And then her website is called Radiant Woman Co. And she offers virtual color analysis. She offers a service helping you figure out what body type you are. She offers personal styling services, and they're all very affordable. She was really wonderful to work with, so I highly recommend checking her out. And she posts things as well about color seasons and body typings on her Instagram account. And she is a Christian, so her message really with her account is trying to help Christian women dress their best to reflect God's artistry in us and in how He created us. And I think that's really cool. So those two accounts I would follow if you're interested in color seasons and body typing. Dearly Bethany on YouTube. This is somebody that I found recently, and she has a whole series on how to dress to look taller. She's talking specifically to shorter girls, and she has a lot of really helpful tips for what kind of pants to wear, what kind of shirts to wear, outfits that are the most flattering if you're a petite girl. She doesn't have the same body type as me, but she is petite, and she gives a lot of really good, helpful tips for being petite. And also, she just has a lot of really great style videos in general. So, Dearly Bethany on YouTube. Daily Connoisseur on YouTube. She is very big on talking about elegant living, stylish living. She has a lot of style videos. She has a lot of how to be chic videos. And I'm going to talk about books in a second, but she's actually the author of some of the book series that I'm going to talk about. But just her entire YouTube channel is just really inspiring. And listening to her really helped me with my personal style. Even though she and I have very different personal style, I find so much inspiration from her. Her name is Jennifer L. Scott, and her YouTube channel is Daily Connoisseur. Mrs. Midwest on Instagram and YouTube. On YouTube, she has a lot of style videos, and she talks a lot about femininity and how to dress more femininely and not being afraid to dress in feminine colors and silhouettes. I found her videos to be very, very helpful for me, especially at the beginning of my style journey, so I would look her up. And then this one is just for fun. If you are interested in learning more about fashion decades, if you are interested in a costume analysis from movies, it's just like really fun stuff about fashion. I would look up Modern Girls, and Girls is Gurlz on YouTube. She has tons of videos. I don't watch every single one, but a lot of the ones she talks about specific aesthetics. She talks about trend cycles. She gives her predictions for what she thinks the fashion will be for that year. And then she does costume analysis. And I love when people do or character analysis in movies. I love when people go over the costumes and like the specific design for costumes for specific movie characters and how they evolve through the movie, and that causes their costumes to evolve. I find that stuff so fun. So Modern Girls on YouTube if you want to kind of nerd out on some of that stuff. And then for books, I would say I read the book a couple of years ago, Wife Dressing, and it's by a fashion designer, Anne Fogarty, and she was a fashion designer in the 1950s. The book was written in the 1950s, so when you go into it, know that it was written in the 1950s, so take it with a grain of salt. But I just found it really, really fun and interesting to listen to the details about women's fashion at the time. She goes into everything from travel fashion to at-home fashion, accessories, hostessing. It's just a really fun read if you're interested in fashion at all, especially if you like vintage fashion. It's just a really fun book to read. And then the Madame Chic books. The Madame Chic books are written by Jennifer L. Scott from Daily Connoisseur. they are just really good books in general. They're not even completely fashion related, but there's a lot of fashion tips given in the book. And just overall, they really help you with your mindset to dressing your best and living your best. And I loved those books. So that is all the resources that I'm going to give you for this episode. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. I am like really out of breath and my mouth is really dry because I've been talking for a very long time, but I just find this topic so very interesting and I just love to dive into it. So I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. If you did, make sure to like this video. Please share it with a friend that you think would like this podcast. Leave me a comment down below and let me know if you are in the middle of a personal style journey. I will try to leave, if YouTube lets me, because this is a new channel, so they kind of put some restrictions on me, but if YouTube lets me, I will link all of my resources that I can find down below in the description box to make it easy for you. But thank you for joining me this week. I will talk to you guys next week in another episode. I hope that you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next time.